Stop the world, I want to get off. The Spectator magazine, which is the oldest magazine in the world, it is 196 years old, has just been censured by the press regulator IPSO. Now, one of their best writers is a journalist, a gay man, this is relevant, called Gareth Roberts, who's landed himself in hot water. For what crime can you imagine? Has he murdered someone? Has he libeled someone? Has he burgled a house? Did he mug a pensioner at knife point? Did he steal someone's mobile phone whilst riding an electric bicycle through central London? None of the above. He stated a biological fact. There is a journalist called Juno Dawson. Juno Dawson is a trans woman, which is a biological male that identifies as female. And Gareth, in an article for the iconic Spectator magazine, referred to Juno as a man who claims to be a woman. Now, the wording of this may be a little impolite. It may be a little insensitive. It may have hurt the feelings of Juno Dawson. And of course, you know, that's not ideal. We don't want to make people sad, do we? But it's not untrue. And it is important to uphold the principle that journalists can state facts. I'll tell you for why. Because if we yield to this tyranny where you're not allowed to say something a little spicy, like Juno Dawson is a man who claims to be a woman, well, then at that point, you're in a whole Orwellian world of doublespeak where you also can't say lots of other things which are the case and which are a fact. I mean, there's actually talk in the UK of creating a law against misgendering. Okay, so that means that if you called a trans woman a man, you could go to jail, right? That's the implications of a misgendering law. Well, that means that in a modern Western democracy like the UK, you could go to jail for stating an actual fact, for demonstrating biological reality. Imagine being jailed for saying something that is the case. And that's why I'm so angry with this press regulator IPSO, because that's effectively what they're enforcing. And why does trans ideology require such tyranny? Why is it that we need laws? Why is it that press regulators have to clamp down on journalists in modern Britain for stating facts? Well, the reason why is because it's just not true that men are women and that women are men. You have a situation where somebody is born and they feel like they're in the wrong body, and I have sympathy for those people. They should have our respect, our love. They should have, you know, their legal rights, empathy. I've got friends that have been on that trans journey. It's been great for some. It's not been great for others. Good luck to them. It is a free world. But what they can't do is superimpose what is, I'm afraid, effectively a fiction on all the rest of us. And that's why the authorities are so tyrannical. Because trans ideology is based on a lie, because it's based on a fiction, because it's science fiction and fantasy, it has to be rigorously enforced because it's not true. So it requires that underpinning from the entire establishment. And it ain't going to work because the public don't think like that. And also, let's go into the weeds of this, because Juno Dawson is a journalist, a trans woman that was interviewing the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. Now, why is Nicola Sturgeon the former First Woman of Scotland? Because she went down the trans ideology rabbit hole to the point where, whilst she was running Scotland, a male double rapist was accommodated in a women's prison. I mean, it doesn't sound real, does it? It just sounds made up. The idea of a male rapist accommodated in a women's prison, I can't fathom it. And that was one of the big reasons why she went, because in Scotland they had the gender self-ID bill, which basically means that more or less you can just wake up on a Wednesday morning and decide, I'm a girl now. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. So it's absolutely shocking. All of this is Orwellian. The idea of the British press regulator Coming down on the shoulders of a journalist who is stating biological fact is truly Orwellian. The whole thing is Orwellian. And we know that famous quote from Orwell, don't we, about communism, which is basically the party required you to ignore the evidence of your eyes and your ears. It was their final and most important command. And that's what we're witnessing here, that we have to just ignore what our eyes and our ears and our common sense is telling us because of this ideological tyranny. The truth is, folks, that this journalist in particular may have been offended by Gareth Roberts' words, but it's a tough world out there. I get offended every day. People can be very unkind about me. As long as they don't lie about me, they can enjoy. They can knock themselves out because I've got a public profile. You can disagree with me. You can agree with me. Like I say, if you say something that's untrue, well, then I'll take you down. But apart from that, it is your entitled right to criticize me, be rude about me, my hair, my voice, my opinions, you name it. It's all fair game. And do you know why? Because when I go on air, I just tell you what I think. There's no construct. I don't wake up in the morning, lick my finger and think, right, what way is the wind blowing today? What's the right thing to say? What's the correct position? I don't do that. I just say it like it is, which sometimes will get me in hot water. And that's because of the clown world in which we exist. Why? Because I have a habit of pushing back against narrative. And I certainly have a habit of pushing back against tyranny. If anything has to be enforced aggressively, it is probably not all that authentic underneath. So the facts don't care about your feelings, which is why I'm glad that Gareth Roberts wrote these hurty words, because we have to test the boundaries. It's like Ricky Gervais doing his naughty stand-up material, or my friend Giles Corran getting in hot water for being a little bit dismissive of women's cricket. Good luck to him. If we don't keep doing these things, then we will be living in an intellectual prison. And that's why you need your Giles Corrans, your Gareth Roberts, to keep us free. And you don't need these stupid numbnuts, absolutely inane press regulator to criticize a journalist writing for the oldest magazine in the world. I mean, it's just a shocker, isn't it? The original editor of that magazine is spinning in their grave. By the way, why is it that Gareth Roberts is right to call out some of this madness? Well, trans ideology is very different from being respectful to trans people and loving them and making sure they have their legal rights and all the rest of it, respect, all of those British things, which I feel passionately about, and I'm sure you do too. Trans ideology is this religion which says that you can change your sex. Now, I beg to differ, because the world's leading expert on reproduction is Professor Robert Winston, who said that you cannot change your sex. He actually was on Question Time on BBC, and he said, I'll get dog's abuse for saying this, right? I mean, this is the crazy world we live in now. But you cannot change your sex. Every cell in your body has a sex, and it's the XY or the XX. And that is the reality. And the problem with trans ideology is it says, no, that's bigoted and you can change your sex, and that men are women. And so what that means is, if you work on that idea that men are women now, then they should be treated as women, which means they get to enter female spaces, which affects the safety and dignity of women. They get to participate in women's sports, which means breaking records and getting on that podium, leaving a girl that's trained her whole life and made a lot of sacrifices to make way for a man. It means the mutilation of kids in the name of this ideology, because you take a boy that's maybe a little camp, okay, gender non-conforming. And in the old days, that's probably going to be a gay person, isn't it? It's going to be a boy that's camp will probably turn out to be gay. Well, under trans ideology, that little boy gets transitioned into being a girl, which is why many people cannot stand gender ideology, including the gay journalist Gareth Roberts. They consider it, therefore, to be homophobic. It's the same idea. This ideology says that if you're a lesbian and you don't accept a trans woman, which is a biological male identifying as female, then you're a bigot. Now, I don't know too much about the lesbians, but I don't think that they are in the penis business. They don't want a penis around. It's not in their ballpark. Do you know what I mean? Oh, by the way, that was an unfortunate expression, but you know what I'm saying. They don't want it. They are lesbians. That's how ridiculously regressive this all is. Trans ideology involves puberty blockers for children, stopping their bodies developing, tying their breasts down with medieval chest binders. I mean, it's archaic. It's medieval. And therefore, a journalist that pushes back on this is in trouble with the stupid press regulator. Absolutely disgusting. Drag acts in primary school with somebody with prosthetic breasts wiggling his backside around in front of 5-year-olds. If that's not grooming, I don't know what is. Books about masturbation and anal sex in secondary school. The list goes on. It's an absolute scandal, and it's right that the Spectator have pushed back on it. It's right that their editor, Michael Gove, who I don't always agree with, but a stopped clock is right twice a day, said that he will robustly defend this journalist's ability to state biological fact, which is great news. I think what the Spectators should do is they should leave the press regulator, because the press regulator is clearly in this ideological bubble, and the press should be there to facilitate journalists pursuing truth and justice, not hampering them in that process, not clipping their wings, not tying their hands, which is what this ruling actually means. It demonstrates, by the way, just how out of the loop the authorities are, and particularly in the press. Because, you know, if you read any newspaper, most of the newspapers, they're signed up to gender ideology. They're signed up to net zero, right? And the climate change agenda. Now, there is climate change and we're messing up the world. We know that. But there's a healthy debate to be had about how we should do that. But if you read most newspapers, you'll be given the impression that net zero is 100% the science and 100% the only way to bring down emissions, and it will 100% work, ignoring the fact that vast economies like China, India, and Brazil are burning fossil fuels for fun. But if you read a UK newspaper, most of them regulated by these numpties, the press regulator, you would consider net zero to be settled science. It's not. Plus, the impacts of it will have huge implications for our quality of life, the economy, all the rest of it. It was the same during the pandemic. The press sung mostly from one hymn sheet on COVID, which is that we had to lock down as much as possible. We had to wear masks because masks stopped COVID and the vaccine would save us. None of those things happened, folks. The cost of lockdowns, absolutely horrific. Countries that didn't lock down, same outcomes, if not better. The masks never made sense. The holes in a mask are between 500 and 1,000 times bigger than the virus. Make it make sense. And of course, the vaccine, fantastic. You know, it may have saved lives, but no one's ever convinced me why healthy people were vaccinated, given it didn't stop transmission, didn't stop you getting the disease, and it wasn't without side effects, of which there are reportedly far too many. But the press, you know, they were pretty one note on the pandemic. One note on being for immigration, mass immigration, never calling out the crazy numbers. In the UK, almost 2 million people entering the country legally in the last 2 years, 1.7 million. Very little pushback from the press on that one. An agenda against Brexit. We had a 4-year campaign from most of the newspapers to cancel Brexit, the biggest popular vote in the history of this country. Absolutely terrible. So this is establishment media, okay? You see it in the same in broadcasting. And what we need to do is we need to reject that. GBNews is the rejection of that. And brave publications like The Spectator are the rejection of that too. And what they should do is leave the press regulator and enjoy some journalistic freedom so we can get the truth. I don't like this expression gender critical, by the way. It's not gender critical, it is gender factual. And that is the job, folks, of all journalists, is to give you the facts. So there you go. In the end, I'm not worried, because people power wins, common sense wins, science wins, biology wins, and the truth always wins. Good to see you. Catch up next time.